Hello, welcome back to episode 2 of the 100 book bucket list. I have not started a new book, but I wanted to go ahead and choose one with you guys. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like I can screen record on this iPad, so I'm just gonna hold this up to the camera and hopefully that works out. But without further ado, excuse you, she says hi. She wants food. But without further ado, let's choose what the next book I will be reading off the 100 book bucket list poster will be. Okay, we have a short one again. That was The Old Man and the Sea by Ernest Hemingway. I've never read an Ernest Hemingway before, and it's, from what I understand, very short. I would give you a synopsis, but I don't actually know anything about the book, so let me grab it and maybe I can learn a synopsis from that. Well, as far as I did grab it and I read the small synopsis, it seems to be quite literally what is happening on the cover, which is a old Cuban fisherman down on his luck and has a battle with a giant marlin far out in the Gulf Stream. I'm sure there's more to it than that. I'm sure we're gonna have more like internal monologue, but that seems to be all this is about as far as plot goes. And again, it's very short. I think most people have read this for school, but my English department in high school and in college were not great, so I haven't read a lot of what other people have read. Okay, it looks like this is just 127 pages. I do break up the books in this series with books that are like for fun. I mean, these are for fun as well, but I don't want to be reading back-to-back classics. I feel like I would get burnt out really easily that way, so I split it up with books that aren't on this list. So I will be finishing my current read, and once I am done with that, I will move on to this and come back with my thoughts. Given that it is so short, I probably will not have like any sort of midpoint update. I'll just read the book and then come back with my thoughts on it. So wish me luck. I have heard that this is kind of boring, but hopefully it's not too bad. I will go ahead and read this and I will be back to you. Bye. Okay, I am back with my first update for this episode of the 100 book bucket list. I have finished The Old Man and the Sea by Ernest Hemingway. It was a quick read, only 127 pages. I am ultimately giving this 3 stars because though I wouldn't say I was bored just because it was so short, I wasn't particularly interested. I also did have to look up online to see if maybe there was like meanings that I wasn't picking up on, and there weren't. I need to stop doing that. I just assume because like I'm not discussing it and learning it in a kind of critical manner that maybe I'm not understanding what I should. Usually I understand plenty. That's a conversation I can have with the therapist, but I did finish it, ultimately 3 stars. I will say, like, I mean, this story it is just a man fishing. That's it. He's just catching a huge ass marlin. So take from that what you will, I guess. The whole theme of it is that this old man is really stubborn and he perseveres despite the fact that like he's been in kind of a drought when it comes to his job. He is a fisherman and he's been 84 days without catching anything really of substance. And then also throughout this journey of him catching the fish, which takes multiple days, he's still pushing through despite his age and the pain that he's in. So it's really about that and like overcoming obstacles, I guess, kind of. I mean, I feel like they all lose in the end. So there's that, though he does in the story kind of saying, oh, so what are we gonna do next? So he plans on continuing this, despite what he loses in this overall story. I mean, he as a character is interesting, I guess. It's just I couldn't care too much because it talks about this in the synopsis, like this is written really simplistically, and it is. I think maybe a little too simplistically. I expect slightly better writing in my classics. Not that this was bad per se, it was just very straightforward. But with this being a story that's essentially, for the most part, one character, there is a boy that the old man has like a friendship, the boy kind of plays like a caretaking role for the old man, whether the old man is acknowledging that or not. But he's not there for the majority of the story. The majority of the story is just this old man at sea. So we're stuck in his head with his constantly meandering thoughts. He's interesting in the sense that, like, he's clearly acknowledging his downfalls and with his age, but he is still very determined and he's stubborn and he refuses to give up, even though there are moments where like his mind meanders to kind of darker things and kind of on his mortality, and then he gets a little philosophical and like, is it a sin for me to have killed this fish, even though I consider it my brother or an equal? And he does have a lot of respect, it seems, for nature and the fish as well. I think he kind of sees himself reflected in the fish, as does the audience reading the book, because the fish is just about as stubborn as he is. So they both have an ultimate goal of, I guess, outwitting the other or outlasting the other, and it's just a matter of who can hold out longer. And the old man ultimately does. Not to get into spoilers, I mean, though he does catch the fish, like I said, really they both lose in the end. So overall they do reflect each other, and I think I'm trying to analyze this literally, even though, like, who cares? They are a reflection in multiple ways, like with this stubbornness, but ultimately, despite having persevered through so much for so long, they do ultimately both lose. So they are, throughout the story, kind of a full reflection of each other. So that is interesting if I were to analyze it for, I guess, school or something. And I do, back to the boy, I think he might feel some guilt for the man's ultimate loss of this fish, and for having him being out at sea for several days catching it. I think he feared for his safety as well with this caretaking role that he has. The boy, he was like a fishing partner of the old man, but with his bad luck, his parents had him go fish under someone else, so that's why they weren't together. So I think he feels like a sense of failure having lost this fish. I think maybe he feels like he could have helped him. I think he feels like this wouldn't have been the result had he been with the old man. And the old man clearly is very lonely without the boy. I think he's lonely in general, but he's constantly talking to himself while he's on the boat, while he's fishing, and I think he wonders how much people like actually care that he's been gone for days. And we get a bit of resolution about that by the end, when obviously the boy is immediately coming back to care for him. He's been checking on to see if he's come back for days. The boy also tells him that, like, the Coast Guard, everyone was worried about him. They went searching for him with boats and by plane. They just couldn't see him. He'd gone too far out. So we get a bit of resolution there. I did kind of think I was gonna be sad. I thought Ernest Hemingway was gonna hurt me at one point, because there's like this at the very beginning, and it doesn't really go into it later at all. There's this reference that the boy and the old man are having a conversation about certain things that don't exist, and the boy is just kind of going along with it. So I think the old man has some sort of memory loss, and we see that a lot. I kind of see that at sea a lot as well, because he's repeating to himself that he has to do certain things. So I think there is an issue there as well. It's just not delved into. I thought maybe he was going to delve into it, and then I was going to be sad because, I mean, obviously I know that's something that comes with age, but it's depressing. I don't want to hear about this old man who's done so much in his lifetime just forgetting basic things. But ultimately he still has the young boy, and he's still caring for him. He's going to be back in his under him as a fisherman, so he'll be there to help him at all times. So yeah, I mean, that's really ultimately all I pulled from the story. I don't think that this was maybe the best Ernest Hemingway to have on the list. I understand why Ernest Hemingway is on the list in general, because he's such a prolific author, but I think maybe what I know him for is him being a journalist, and him having essentially been like, what would be the best way to cover the war? The best way to cover the war would be by experiencing it. And then he volunteered as an ambulance driver in World War I. Now, I don't know how long that lasted because he did get injured, but that's kind of like infamous, him having decided that he was going to take his journalism to the next level. And he does have books about World War I. So I think maybe, I know I mentioned that it does seem to be overrepresentation of that on this list, but I feel like, again, someone having experienced it would probably be the better representation to have. So I think maybe, like, I think it's The Sun Also Rises is the one about World War I. Maybe that would have been more appropriate to have on this list, because it had more to do with Ernest Hemingway's life and his experiences as a journalist, though I'm sure he did do some journalistic research when writing this. It's not really what I know him for and what I think a lot of other people know him for, despite The Old Man and the Sea still being a very, like, acclaimed classic. It's just, to me, there probably could have been better picks. I haven't read The Sun Also Rises, so maybe I'm wrong, but it just seems like something that would be a better representation of Ernest Hemingway as a whole. So I'm a little iffy about this one being the choice, and I don't think that The Sun Also Rises is on this list. I guess I could be wrong, but I don't think it is. But either way, that's it for The Old Man and the Sea. I am going to be reading something else that isn't on the list for the next little bit, but I might as well go ahead and spin to see what we'll be reading next for this video, because I don't own all of them, and if I land on something that I don't own, then I'm gonna have to have some time to prepare for it. Okay, here we go. I'll let you guys see that first. I think I see it. Okay. It's To Kill a Mockingbird. I will go ahead and grab that. I think everybody knows what that's about. I say that, but I don't really know what it's about. Okay, I have it. It's here. Most people read this in school. Once again, I did not have a good literary program in my school, so I didn't read it. Okay, so this is about a lawyer in the Deep South defending a black man charged with the rape of a white girl. I'm sure everybody else already knew that's what this was about. Interesting that I'm picking this up so soon after reading from Capoe, because Capoe was like actually childhood friends with Harper Lee, and he dedicated his book to her. So yeah, I can't say that I'm like super excited to read this. I know it's obviously going to have discussion on race and I assume racial injustice. Do I think that Harper Lee, being what I assume is a white woman, would be the appropriate person to have that conversation? Probably not, but this was written in 1960. It is a classic. We'll see what my thoughts are once I've actually finished it. But yeah, that's the next book for this series. I will update once I have made some progress in it. Bye. Hello, we've unlocked a new angle. I'm here to discuss To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. I'm a little over halfway through, pretty much just halfway through. I have to admit, I don't really care for this book. Part of that is like the time period and location, because I live in the South. I don't want to read about the South. Definitely not in the 60s or the 50s. I actually don't know what year this is supposed to take place because it was published in 1960. But that's so, is it supposed to take place in 1960? Maybe the 50s, because like this happens over like multiple years. I think it's like 2 years, but whatever. I'm not loving it, and that kind of has to play into it. There are multiple reasons though. So first of all, the writing is not, in my opinion, all that great. There are moments where Harper Lee writes something pretty, so I know based on that she can write like beautiful sentences, but she doesn't really showcase that in this. A lot of this, I've seen it like once or twice, like, well, this one I just liked. Until I feared I would lose it, I never loved to read. One does not love breathing. See that? And then beautiful things floated around in his dreamy head. He could read 2 books to my one, but he preferred the magic of his own inventions. He could add and subtract faster than lightning, but he preferred his own twilight world, a world where babies slept, waiting to be gathered like morning lilies. Like, to me that's pretty, but it's just so rare that I see that in this book so far. So I don't know why she doesn't kind of show off her writing a little more, but for the most part, this is like a really pretty easy to read. There is a lot of the Southern slang, especially like older Southern slang that I'm not familiar with. Not from Alabama, I'm from North Carolina, so the slang might be different. Obviously it's a different time period as well. And then as far as the plot goes, this is allegedly about a lawyer defending a black man who is charged with raping a white girl. Halfway through the book, that hasn't really started. We do get like some mentions of it earlier on, like around the 100-page mark, so that's a third of the way through this book, is 300 pages. So yeah, the plot is not coming along, or at least what the synopsis of this book says the plot is. It's not happening, at least not very quickly. Now, the trial, from what I understand, is supposed to be in the summertime, and we've reached the summertime, so I imagine that'll be more relevant in the second half. But as of right now, this is actually more, to me, more of a coming of age story. I mean, the main character, I didn't know this, the main character is the young daughter of the lawyer in the story. So I just assumed we were following the lawyer, but we're not. We're following his annoying 6-year-old daughter. I do not like her, but I also wasn't expecting to read from a child's point of view. She's pretty ignorant. I mean, she's a child, so that makes sense, but it just seems like a lot of the story so far is kind of learning life lessons, people teaching her like not to judge others and stuff like that. There are random, well, I guess it wouldn't be random, some of it, but like sometimes there are just different morals that are brought up kind of throughout the story. Like at one point, like it's mentioned that religion can be kind of weaponized, used, interpreted in a way that is harmful. And she talks about how, like, she goes to a church sermon, and most of her sermons are similar to this, where they talk about the impurity of women and how women are, like, seen as tempting and bad. But that's not a focus of the story. That just kind of was randomly mentioned. And then we see the reason, like, Atticus, her father, took on the case that the story revolves around was because he couldn't live with himself if he didn't abide by his own morals, and that he chooses to love everyone and stuff like that. So I can see that there's, like, moments where I think this is, you know, trying to teach a lesson. I don't know if it's super successful, especially since we're in the eyes of this little girl who is still so ignorant. She uses the N-word in multiple ways. I mean, she's used the, like, N-word, and then also one that I don't think was technically considered a slur back in this time, the ends in O. To me, it's all the same. I'm not using any of it. No one really should, but she still uses that, even though, like, she acknowledges that when people use it, they're using it in an insulting way. And then she makes really random comments, like this like housekeeper, I guess you would call her, that they have, she's black, she brings them to the black church, and typically she talks the way that these children talk, but when she's at church, she talks just like all the other black people, which obviously I know this now as code switching. That term didn't exist back in that time, but she asked her why she does this, and even though she knows it's wrong, and I don't understand what she's trying to say there. Like, how is speaking in a slang wrong? Because, like, the main character, she speaks in, like, Southern slang. So what about her black friend speaking in AAVE is wrong? Like, to me, they're both kind of slangs. That weird implication that it's wrong, it's weird to me, and it didn't get really resolved either. No one explained to her that there's nothing wrong with speaking the way that's normal to you. And then she just, this might be more of a Harper Lee thing, but there was, like, a weird comment about the smell of clean black folks. I'm just like, yeah, she uses a different word, but I'm not gonna say it. The warm, bittersweet smell of clean black people welcomed us as we entered the churchyard. What is that supposed to mean? It's just, it's strange. I don't know what she's talking about. I'm a little uncomfortable with, like, how she's referring to people, and then obviously that's not even including the slurs that she uses. So yeah, I'm not loving it, especially since, you know, I went into this thinking it was one thing and I'm getting so far something completely different. I also don't know why this is taught in schools. I don't see the point. Right now there's not, like, any strong moral argument going on. I don't think this is, like, a super well written enough for it to be taught in schools. Maybe it's just supposed to be, like, a representation of this time period and place in history, possibly, but to me, like, halfway through, I don't get the point. If it's supposed to be something discussing racial injustice, there's so much better stuff you could choose, and stuff that's not written by a white person for a white person. But alas, I do know that I personally didn't read this in school, but plenty of my peers did, and I believe they continue to do so. I haven't been out of school for that long, so I don't really know why that's a thing, and I so far don't think it deserves to be on this list, because I mean, we have other stories from black people about black people and racial injustice, so I think those are maybe more important. Those are on the list, or some of them are. This one so far just seems unnecessary, but maybe it's on there just because of how weirdly notorious it has become in literary history and in the, at least American school system. But yeah, that's what I have to say so far. I do imagine that going to the end of this book, we're gonna get more into the actual plot, but we'll see, and I'll update once I finish this. Hello, I am back to wrap up To Kill a Mockingbird, the second book for this video. I have decided to give this 2.5 stars. It definitely wasn't my favorite. A lot of my issues still stand. As far as this book goes, and it being about a black man on trial for the alleged rape of a white woman, that plot is maybe like a quarter of the book, so I didn't love that. I did find the courtroom stuff to be interesting. It definitely like proved that this was ultimately an injustice. Everyone in the courtroom knew that this man was not guilty, and yet he was found guilty anyways, just based on the color of his skin, which is what I anticipated would happen. And it's kind of like, you know, a learning lesson for the main character. I think it's told to be accessible to children, first off. I think it's also catered towards white people. It is written by a white person, so that makes sense. But I think the whole point it's trying to get across is like, this child is coming to terms or learning that the world is not a fair place, and learning that these racial injustices exist. We also see kind of like them grab at other topics as well, like sexism. And there was like a comment about how women, adult women who are sexually assaulted, have to pretty much almost like be killed to prove that they were assaulted. And so there are comments like that as well. I would prefer if like the main focus of the story, we didn't have those kind of side comments and focused more on the racial inequality and injustice in the court system, or just in this town in general. And I would have wanted it to really spread out through the entire book. We do see, again, other kind of like side learning lessons for the main character. If you hear that, my cats are eating. I apologize. So with Boo Radley, who is, I assume to be a disabled man, he comes across as kind of childish when he, or childlike when he shows up at the very end of this book. So they're learning to like not judge people before you get to know them, because Boo Radley was like this hermit and no one really knew him. The kids made up all these rumors about him being a bad person and him coming out at night to look in people's windows and stuff like that, only for him to quite literally save the day for them in the end. And so I think it's just like it really feels like it's written for children to me, which is weird since it does discuss heavier and more taboo topics like rape. Now, this main character doesn't know what rape is, and it doesn't get explained to her, so maybe a child could read that. They'd probably have some questions about what rape is, but as an adult, to me it's kind of strange that it does feel like it's for a younger audience, while also directly mentioning that it does also allude to other things that I feel like could be more taboo, and it doesn't directly address it. So again, that could be kind of a way of writing it to where it can be accessible to a younger audience. And I do think that the writing style is pretty simplistic, so that also kind of lends to my thoughts on this being something written more for children, or at least like middle-aged kids, maybe not young children, but old enough to read a novel. Now, I still have some issues with some of the language and how the morals are discussed. So there's definitely, like, this book did not age well in my opinion. I understand why it's something a lot of people don't really want to be taught in schools anymore, but as far as I'm aware, people were still reading it in school when I was in school, which wasn't that long ago. So to me, I feel like there are better things you could read, especially since there is so much that's not dated well, especially the use of the N-word. There's also some, like, a sexist comment about women not being fit to be on a jury. There's also, like, rude references to disability. The man who's accused of rape, he has an arm that was caught in machinery, I believe, when he was a child, so he can't use it. It's completely limp. And at one point, the main character refers to him as not being whole because he's lacks the use of that arm, which I found a really insensitive, inappropriate way to refer to somebody with a disability. And even in discussing race, obviously we have the N-word being used a lot in this book, but, like, there's one moment where essentially a group comes to try and lynch the man that is going to be on trial. This is before his trial. Luckily, that gets stopped, but Atticus, the lawyer that's representing him, refers to this as a blind spot in the characters' personalities, which is way, way too forgiving, in my opinion. I think overall, in my opinion, no, not in my opinion, it's a fact. It's way too forgiving to say someone who's going to hurt someone else based on their race is just, you know, they have some parts of their personality that just aren't that great, but they're still a good person. No, not at all. And I don't think that's a good example to lead with. And so that's concerning. I don't appreciate that this man didn't take, like, more of a solid stance. Obviously, he fought for this black man in court, but in his day-to-day life, I feel like he wasn't implementing or expressing his distaste for racism as well as he should have. And that reflects, I feel like, in the children as well, because it took me a long time to feel like Scout had actually learned any lessons. She continued to say, like, offensive stuff throughout this book, and I was starting to wonder if she would ever learn anything, or if she was just an annoying, ignorant child, and she kind of is. I think in the end she does learn or start to understand that, like, everyone is equal, that white and black men deserve justice and all that, but it really took her a long time to get there. So yeah, overall, I gave it 2.5. It's not something I'm gonna keep on my shelves. I personally don't think that it really deserves to be on this list. I don't think it was doing anything spectacular and as far as writing goes, and I feel like I know there are books about the same subject that are way better and that take a more critical approach to it, and a less offensive approach to it, that should be taught instead. I personally think maybe this was really revolutionary for its time. I know it was published right in 1960, right before the Civil Rights Movement. And so when I was reading up on people's personal feelings about it, it kind of helped white folks understand racism a little more and was influential to them going into the Civil Rights Movement. But I don't think that a book like this that is clearly catered towards white people should be something that we hold so highly anymore, because it's just a very basic discussion of it, and I feel like I know we can get better discussions and better conversations from own voices and narratives about the same thing. So yeah, maybe it was great in its time period, but we're no longer there. And I don't think it holds up the way that our school system and this list seem to think it does. But yeah, that's To Kill a Mockingbird. I obviously won't be keeping that, but I'm not going to start the next book right away. I do want to spin the wheel just to see what it is and see if I need to purchase it or put it on hold from the library. Okay, got the wheel pulled up. There's an ad in the corner, ignore that. And I'll just go ahead and tap. Okay. Okay. A change of pace, I think. So the next book that I will be reading in this episode, and the final book for this episode, is Tell No One by Harlan Coben. This is a suspense murder mystery, I assume. It does not have a synopsis on this book, so I actually have no idea what it's about. I do know Harlan Coben is a very big mystery thriller writer. He's kind of like one of the dude bro thrillers. I would put him on par with like James Patterson. That's how often I see him. Let me see, when was this published? This was published in 2001. So this is definitely newer than the rest of the books that I've read so far for this series. I think that this is like the only representation of a mystery thriller suspense novel on here, or at least like in terms of it being known as that. I feel like you probably could say that like Count of Monte Cristo or Crime and Punishment maybe fall kind of into those categories as well, but they're not known as mysteries or thrillers in any way. They just happen to do with murder and revenge. So yeah, I have no idea what this is about, but this will be the next thing that I read. Maybe I'll become a Harlan Coben stan. Probably not, but I will check back once I have made some progress in this. Let me see how long it is. Looks like it's 370 pages, so I will check back once I am halfway through, and I will update you on how I'm feeling. I'm here with updates on Tell No One by Harlan Coben. I would like to make a few amendments on what I said in the initial clip. First, I said that this is the only like mystery thriller on the list. That's not true. I remembered that The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo by Stieg Larsson is actually also on this list. It's a little different because I know that one actually, I believe it has to do with violence against women, specifically in, I think, Sweden is where Stieg Larsson is from. I think it has like more relative themes to discuss that may make it a little more warranted in being on this list. My other amendment I need to make is I initially said that there is no synopsis on this book. That is a lie. The back of this book is just laid out really strangely, so it's like a blurb, a blurb, a blurb, and then these two paragraphs are the synopsis. So I didn't notice that until after the last clip. But to let you know what this is about, essentially we follow Dr. David Beck, who 8 years ago he was attacked and his wife was murdered, and flash forward 8 years, he is still grieving but working as a pediatrician, and he gets an email with some phrasing that suggests his wife is still alive, and things go from there. This is what I would call dude bro mystery thriller. It's not my genre of book, but I mean, it's not uninteresting. I at the moment don't know why it would possibly be on this list, because there's nothing special about it. We're not focusing on any like specific conversations or themes. There is like I guess you could say a kind of a theme of grief, because he is, you know, grieving his wife and his family, because he's had some other losses in his family, but we kind of glaze over that and go more into the plot and a bit of action as well. So like, other than the grief that he has, there isn't really any sort of conversation to be had. There isn't a moral that I'm seeing in this story. Now, as far as the mystery of this goes, I'm not really trying to figure out what's going on. I'm just along for the ride. It does seem like David might not be a completely reliable character. He is obviously hiding something from the reader. He has guilt over something. There are sometimes like brief mentions of having done something or not wanting to think about something that he's done in the past, but we don't know what any of that is, or how, or if it plays into the mystery as a whole. He also does mention some history of psychiatric issues in his family, so I hope that's potentially kind of a hint at him being unreliable, and there potentially being a twist as far as his sanity goes. I really hope it doesn't go in that direction. That would make me absolutely hate this book, but that is something that's kind of just nudged in there briefly in one line. I'm hoping it's just a little odd comment and it doesn't mean anything more than that. The mystery also does have a lot to do with organized crime. We get multiple perspectives, so we're seeing some of these organized crime members. They work for a billionaire, and somehow that is going to be related to Elizabeth, which is David's dead wife. And I don't know in what way. I do know she's an attorney, which I forgot about that at the beginning of this book. I was reminded recently that she's an attorney, so that might play into it. A lot of this hasn't been explained, and now my notes are just going over the first half of this book, but I am, I'd say 3/4 of the way through, so I imagine a lot's gonna happen in this last quarter. And based on the fact that everything that we've learned, even in the synopsis, is leading us to believe that Elizabeth is actually not dead, I imagine that the resolution is going to be pretty convoluted. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'll be shocked and satisfied with the ending. Where I'm at right now, I'm not seeing it. But I guess I'll have to find out. I do have some issues with this book as far as characters, pretty much. This was written in 2001, or at least that's when it was published. I was not expecting this, but we do actually have 2 lesbian side characters, which is cool to see in a book that was published in 2001. I mean, obviously this isn't, being gay was slightly more accepted than in like a classic time period, but this is pre-gay marriage and all that. So, and with Harlan Coben being what I consider a dude bro mystery thriller author, I wasn't expecting that. One of the side characters is like pretty prominent, that one of the lesbian side characters was pretty prominent. However, I do have an issue with some of that representation, because he portrays her specifically as kind of promiscuous, like she doesn't want to be tied down to one person, and I feel like that can be a stereotype, maybe less so with lesbian characters, more so with bisexual characters, but it does still kind of rub me the wrong way that this one marginalized character, well, there's multiple, but I have issues with how he represents the others as well. This specific marginalized character is being represented as promiscuous, which just to me, I think maybe queer women in general tend to be portrayed that way in earlier media, and I don't love it. And she still does have like a relationship with her partner, and they have a child, so it's not a completely horrible relationship. It's just that one aspect, it rubbed me the wrong way. As far as other bad things, there's definitely racial stereotyping. The main character clearly is not against racial stereotyping. There is a character, a client of his, who is a black guy, and he is stereotypically portrayed as a gang member, a drug dealer. He's involved in, I mean, obviously being in a gang, he's involved in organized crime. So yeah, that's not good. That's actually in this a lot. He is like the one black character in this book, and he's a gang leader. That's it very much, it's dated, and it's not looking good. I do hope that this character does not die, because that would be even worse in my opinion. Have one black character and then kill him off, you know. There is also the F slur used in this book. It's only been once, but it was used, and I do think in 2001, especially when you're putting queer characters in the story, the F slur is no longer acceptable to be using. It never was, but you can't even give it the benefit of the doubt, having been written in a time period when people used it commonly, because in 2001 I think we were past that. So there's that. And then my other issue with characters, it's not an ethical or political one. The cops in this story, the FBI agents in this story, my God, when they first show up and start questioning him, it is like a fucking horrendous cable TV show version of an interrogation. It is the most stereotypical, cheesy thing I've ever read in my life. It's like really the good cop, bad cop kind of thing. Like, I have to find an example because it sucks so bad. So when the cops they're like stupidly sarcastic with him when he's asking, or he doesn't understand a question, like one of them turns to the other and he goes, "Am I asking a complicated question here, Tom?" "No, Nick, I don't think so." "Me neither." "Maybe you object to the form of the question, Doc." "That's it. That's what they always do on the practice, Nick. Object to the form of the question." "That they do, Tom. That they do." And then they say, "I'll rephrase it, right?" Something like that. "Yeah, something like that. So let me rephrase it." I'm like, and then they do this several times. They have just like these little asides with each other, and it's the dumbest shit I've ever read. I I hope no cop in real life is this sarcastic. I've never seen an interrogation video where they are. And I've watched lots of true crime. So yeah, that was not a good first impression. Luckily, that doesn't really continue with these specific FBI agents. There is another like NYPD cop that shows up later who is disgusting. He's like, they're listing off things that they have against this guy, and one of them, just every time they list off a point that like is in favor of them arresting him, this guy just makes the most crude comments. He's like, go ahead, Krinsky, make me wet. Like, why would you say that? And then he's like, it just interjects randomly. He's like, harder. I'm like, that's disgusting. You were in a professional setting with a literal lawyer, with the district attorney, and you're saying this dumb shit. Why do you sound like a fucking 18-year-old? No, younger than that, like a 15-year-old boy who just learned what sex is. It's so weird, it's so out of pocket, and it's nasty. And why Harlan? Like, this is why you get the dude bro title from me, because the writing overall isn't bad. Like I said, it's interesting, and it's not my genre, it's interesting enough, but then he just interjects these like gross men things. But like, you're a grown man. Grown men don't speak like this. But I don't think any like professional man would act that immature, especially in a serious setting like that. And these like random comments, like the dude bro comments, not always sexual, but they'll just randomly show up throughout the book in the narrative, and it really takes away from everything. Like, I can't take this man seriously when he says, when there's just like stupid, like random things, like his ringtone for his email being the Homer Simpson yelling about the malice here. Look, I don't watch The Simpsons, so I don't know. But yeah, that's just one of the examples. There'll just be weird little interjections that are unnecessary, and really just, they take me out of the story. It reminds me that this is a man writing this, and a potentially not very mature man at that. So yeah, not loving that. Again, the actual plot of the story isn't horrible. I hate all the stereotypes that are in here. I am obviously going to continue reading and figure out what's going on. As of right now, I don't see any point of it being on this list. Like I said, there's no deeper conversation to have. This is just kind of like a mystery sort of action story, and it's, like I said, probably going to be pretty convoluted. Maybe if there's a crazy twist, I'll let you know, but more than likely I'm going to come back and tell you it was convoluted. We'll just have to see. But those are my thoughts so far. I'll let you know how I feel once I've finished it. Hopefully it's not as bad as I'm anticipating, but we'll have to see, and I'll give you that update once I'm done. Bye. So I am back to give my final update on Tell No One by Harlan Coben and to close out this vlog. And unfortunately, I cannot say that this book improved at all for me. I did end up giving it 2 stars. So it appears that my ratings have gotten progressively worse throughout this video. We started off with a 3-star, a 2.5, and now a 2. This book was not good. There was like, I mentioned all the stereotypes and I looked at some reviews, and I was not the only one that saw this. There's just a bunch of just casual racism and stereotyping going on in this book. There was some sexist comments about women as well, though I think that played into the racism as well. So like, I don't know why in the world this would be picked to be on this list, unless they just wanted to represent like a really popular thriller mystery author. And they could have done that better, because this was not it. This was not good. It wasn't really thrilling either. There's a blurb on the front from Jeffrey Deaver, who I don't know who that man is, but he said that this is suspense at its finest. Where? Jeffrey, where is the suspense? Because I didn't see it. I knew all the twists, and typically, honestly, I'm fine with that, because if a book can intrigue me with the characters and the plot, if it makes sense, then I don't care that I understand, that I guessed the ending. This, however, I had no investment in. I had no investment in the characters. I did not care. Like, I knew every twist that was coming, except for like one, because it wasn't necessary. There's already a big enough mystery going on in here, and then they added like another mystery, which it didn't matter, and I didn't care about, because I didn't care about these characters, because they weren't particularly interesting, just very bland characters. And there is no like thematic element or moral to this story in any way, so I don't really know what the benefit of reading it is supposed to be. And for it to be on a list of the 100 best books, or 100 books you should read in your lifetime, I feel like I should get something out of reading a book, and I didn't. And I'm trying to be objective. Frankly, I cannot see what you would get out of reading this book. It's just a basic white man thriller. Like, there's nothing special about this. I can't interpret a way that there would be. So yeah, this was not good. It wasn't like, frankly, well, I guess it was a little offensive and sometimes, but it kept my attention. That's why it's getting a 2 stars. Even though I didn't care, it was fast enough that I was reading through it perfectly fine. I could get through it. I wasn't slogging along wanting to DNF it. So it gets 2. It's not so egregious that it gets a 1, but I wouldn't recommend picking it up, unfortunately. So yeah, that is my kind of bummer ending to this vlog. I, again, had 3 books that were not my favorite. I'll recap my ratings again. I read The Old Man and the Sea by Ernest Hemingway, which I gave 3 stars. I didn't dislike it, it was just boring, and I feel like they could have chosen a better Ernest Hemingway to be on this list. Gave 2.5 stars to Kill a Mockingbird. I see Harper Lee's potential in terms of writing style. This book has not aged well, so it wasn't for me. And a book that seems, in my opinion, to be for no one is Tell No One by Carlin Hoban, which is 2 stars. So that is all that I have for this video. I've already chosen what I'm going to read starting the next one. Hopefully the next video will be less of a bummer, but with 100 books, there's got to be some misses. So hopefully we've got most of those misses out of the way, and I will have better news coming in the next episode. But that is it. I will see you all in my next one. Bye.